You often have some idea where you've already written some text about your idea, but want an AI model to help you edit and refine your text. I often show my writing to AI to help me make it better. AI is great at this task, and it always has time to read your work, whereas finding a human to help you out might be trickier. You've already learned how to avoid sycophancy, but how do you get the best quality editing and critique? Let's take a look. One useful technique for editing with AI is to edit your article piece by piece, such as one sentence at a time or one paragraph at a time, rather than telling it to edit the entire article all at once. And to do a little brainstorming around each paragraph until I've nailed down one paragraph before going on to the next one. For example, if someone's written this sentence, the public thinks achieving AGI, artificial general intelligence, means computers will be as smart as people. You might ask AI to help brainstorm a few different ways to say this. And so it may come up with a punchy way to say this, a visionary way to say this, a conversational way to say this. And depending on your editing goals, you could even iterate a little bit until you pick some version of rephrasing this part of the text that you like. After you've nailed this down, then go on to the second sentence or maybe the second paragraph and work on that a little bit with the AI, and then go on to the next sentence and next paragraph and so on until you get through your entire article. And I find that working on one piece of a long article at a time makes for a much more manageable workflow than if it were to change a lot of things all at the same time and then you're reading this very long edited article to figure out what has changed and what you like and don't like. Now, if you want high-level, more holistic feedback about an entire piece you've written, it turns out AI can help with that too. But because of sycophancy, AI is often not a very good objective critic. For example, if you wrote a sci-fi short story about an astronaut stepping out of his ship, and if you ask AI without further instructions to critique it, there's a good chance it'll tell you whatever you did is fantastic work. In contrast, there's a very helpful technique to guide AI in how to evaluate your work to give you more helpful, critical feedback. And that is to give it a rubric, and that means a grading criteria. For example, you might write a rubric that specifies what are the most important criteria by which to grade or to judge the work. So you may say that characters of the story is worth 25 points out of 100, to plot 25 points, world building, writing craft, and establish a point system, and then also develop detailed instructions on how to evaluate each of these criteria. So to evaluate characters, maybe ask if every named character has a goal, and that's worth 10 points, conflict between two characters' goals, and so on. And giving AI very explicit criteria on how to judge work forces the AI to be more objective. One thing to notice about these criteria is that each of them is very clearly and unambiguously defined. So for each text, each of these criteria is either true or false, yes or no, and there's nothing in between. So either it's true that every named character has a goal, or it's not true. And these completely objective criteria forces AI to look at whatever you're giving it through a objective, well-specified standard with no ambiguity. And by the way, if you're not sure what rubric or what grading criteria to use, you can brainstorm with AI to develop that rubric, and AI is actually pretty good at this too. After you've written a rubric, you can then provide the rubric as well as the story, and in your prompt, ask the AI to be objective. So critique the attached sci-fi short story, assign a score per category, then sum the scores at the end. And by giving the AI these very clear instructions on what to do to sum the scores at the end, it then hopefully gives a more objective assessment of your story. If you want, you can also ask it to then give you suggestions on how to improve the story to do better on this rubric, and this will cause it to give you more focused suggestions to improve it in the dimensions that you think matter the most. In contrast, poorly written rubrics encourage sycophancy and ambiguous or less objective thinking. For example, if you say, "I will work on the sci-fi story, please score it out of 100. One of the things that's strange about this prompt is you first ask it the score out of 100, so that will tend to cause it to leap to the conclusion about what score, and then only after that, assign a score per category: characters, plot, world building, and writing craft. And these are ambiguously defined categories because we've not told it how to score characters, plot, and so on. And so this will tend to cause the AI model to first come up with some score and then justify it, rather than score it carefully according to rubric and then add it up to then come up with a more thoughtful score. And as you see in the practice lab to come at the end of this module, this type of rubric will tend to give higher scores than more objective rubrics. We talked about using AI to critique and help give suggestions for improving your work. It turns out that having AI critique its own work, or having one AI model critique a different AI model's work, can also help improve the results. For example, if you ask ChatGPT to write a user manual for a fancy role-playing game, then it might generate a file for you. And one thing you could do is provide a rubric for ChatGPT to critique its own work, but a neat technique is to find a different AI model, maybe Gemini, and give that a grading rubric to have Gemini critique ChatGPT's work, or vice versa. And it turns out that this type of cross-model review, where you have one model review a different model's output, it helps integrate a bit of knowledge from the two different models and can result in slightly better results than if you were to ask one model to critique its own results. I think using multiple models in this context might give only a slight boost in performance. Realistically, if you ask ChatGPT to review its own results, or ask Gemini to review its own results, I think that will actually do just fine. But sometimes I find it reassuring if a totally different model judges the output of a different AI model. And I use this technique only rarely myself, but one thing I do is frequently switch between different AI models. It turns out that AI models are advancing rapidly, and at different moments in time, different models will do better on different tasks. And so routinely trying out different models will help keep you sharp and keep honing your intuition about what model is best for what task. AI models have what's called jagged intelligence. If the circle represents the task of what people can do, maybe in a job or maybe in a personal context, it turns out that AI can do some things better than any person, like quickly read tons of web pages or solve tricky math problems. But there are also many tasks that AI doesn't do as well as people. So there's some tasks where AI does poorer than human and some where it does much better than human. And different AI models are jagged in different ways. So the tasks different AI models can do well are different. Moreover, the marketplace of AI models is highly competitive. So ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, really the long list of model providers are releasing better models all the time. And so the best model for your task will likely change rapidly over time. And so I find that I'll often take the same prompt and feed it to multiple different models to see how they compare, and just continuously hones my intuition about what models are best for which of the tasks I care about. So that takes us to almost the end of this module. I hope you've seen that AI models are really useful for reasoning tasks, as well as for brainstorming, writing, editing, and critiquing your work. These are powerful ways of using AI as a thought partner that I found very useful in my own work, and that I'm confident you will too. Let's go on to the next video to explore the practice lab for this module.